All right. Well, here we are. We're going to go into emotional phobia and how we get to emotional alchemy. We have to go back to the emotional phobia part, and that's where most of us, it's sort of like the bottom line where we're starting. And well, one thing is fear, despair, and grief. These dark emotions that we're going to try to get the skill of working with. They existed before we were even born for each of us. So we have to go way back, way back, way back, as Van would say. We have to go way back to when we were in our mother's womb, and we experienced that before we were even born. I mean, just think about it for do a little thought experiment. We're in this comfy little condo inside our mom in her womb, and even though we didn't have a left brain, so we didn't know anything about gestation and 9 months and contractions and all that kind of stuff, and then birth. We didn't know anything. We were just there, and it was pretty nice. Low lighting, food on demand through the umbilical cord, comfy, sort of held by the space, water bed, and so even though we didn't have a left brain to have a worldview, we had an emotional and sensorial worldview, and this was pretty good. We felt like, wow, I don't know maybe we had some little bit of remembrance if we had a previous life, if you believe in that kind of stuff, that, things were rough, but boy, we hit pay dirt here. This is pretty great. Our worldview, even though it was not cognitive, it was emotional and sensory. Our worldview was, yeah, this is great. I can really trust this place and I'm going to hang out here forever. Well, then, boom, contractions start. And, we're going to deal with these dark emotions in a certain order, actually a kind of reverse order. Because the first thing we felt was when, everything was great. And then the next second, the known universe that we trusted was crushing us at 100 pounds per square inch. Imagine that. We were all there. We're going from the comfort zone to the trauma zone. There's 3 zones: comfort zone, challenge zone, and then trauma zone. In the comfort zone and in the trauma zone, you don't learn much. You don't grow. Okay, and not really psychically and spiritually, but you don't grow much when you're in trauma either. And so we went right from the comfort zone to the trauma zone with no in between. And then, we're trying to pass through this very narrow cavity. I've been in a passage tomb in Ireland at New Grange, and you have to squeeze through this area to get in and to get out. And so we're being squeezed out. These contractions are coming. And so fear was the first thing, like panic, fear. And then actually, even though it's not cognitive yet, then our worldview was shattered, which is what despair is all about. We're going to look more into that, but you had a view of the universe and then all of a sudden blown to bits. We felt that emotionally and sensorily. And then finally, grief. We lost this home that we knew for 9 months. And then when we're actually born, they cut the umbilical cord, and now we're in this huge space. It was the beginning of everybody's a little bit of fear of space, agoraphobia, as they call it, the fear of the big space. And so I remember when my first grandchild was born, my son was holding him, and Devin was just crying like crazy. I got a picture of it on my altar here, his first moments. And he is not a happy camper. He's crying. I want to go back. I lost something. So grief. So this progression is how we're born. We're born in fear, despair, and then grief, the loss of that home we knew and trusted. We don't know that that, if we had stayed there beyond that time much, everything would have collapsed anyway. We don't know about all that. Cognitively, we don't know. But we do feel all those three dark emotions right from the beginning. And I remember seeing my son, who was like totally panicked, holding this little crying thing. And then the nurse said, "Well, here, give him to me." And so she took him, she put him down, she wrapped the blanket real tight around him. All of a sudden, he stopped crying. He's back in that tight space again, you see. And in a sense, and then he wanted to take the woman home. How'd you do that? He didn't know what she was doing. She was back in that tight space. Well, there's a certain sense that we've been trying to get back in that tight space ever since. We do that with our minds as our minds develop, et cetera. But so we experienced all that from the very beginning. And that was a crisis. It was trauma. It was as big as any crisis we'll ever face in this life. And we got through it. And here we are. So despite what our family was, what its abilities were to nurture us and what it gave us a sense of to repair that, here we are. So we can work with this. We can work with this crisis. Part of the reason that I decided to do this now was we're in an existential crisis now. I don't have to spend much time to sketch it out. You feel it. Let me just a few of the high points. We've got nuclear war back on the table, going on in Ukraine, and threats about using nukes. They have a nuclear power plant where they're shooting missiles around it. It's as dangerous as it's got there. The climate. I don't have to say much more about what's going on. That's part of it. There's the crisis of democracy and the shift back to fascism. The greatest generation fought to defeat fascisms in World War II, and now it's coming back not just in the United States, but there's I think there's at least 9 countries which are teetering on this. It's a kind of movement. Even if you don't pay attention to the news and maybe you don't know this intellectually, you're feeling it. You're feeling it. And if you're in America, if you're a woman in America, you've just had your rights stripped from you in terms of your biological, what to do with your own body. We could go on and on. This is a crisis. Miriam Greenspan wrote this book after 9/11, because when crisis hits, kind of trauma hits all at once, we start to get overwhelmed. We don't know what to do with that energy, and and part of the reason we don't is because of we were never taught. So we're going on the road to sort of learn some things. This is will be challenging work. There's those 3 zones: comfort zone, you don't learn much, you don't grow; trauma zone, you freeze, you don't grow. But in this thin zone, that it's called the challenge zone. So it's what Jesus called the narrow way, and what Buddha called the middle way. In this place, you can learn a lot and you grow a lot, but it is challenging. So even the thought of working with the painful emotions skillfully, learning how to work with them skillfully, it's a challenge. It's a challenge, but the benefits of it are just to put that out front. If you can learn how to work with grief skillfully, which we'll go on to next time, you can become a person of deep gratitude out of grief. This is this philosopher's stone. This is this alchemy we're talking about. Grief can turn into deep gratitude if you can transform it, and we'll talk about how that happens. Despair can turn into deep trust and hope, a sense of that. The opposite. You're turning and there's in the world now. And then fear can turn into joy, and the fact that this is really the only way to those things. And if you don't have much gratitude for this life, and if you don't have much trust and hope. And if you don't have much joy, it's because those basic dark emotions are untransformed yet. And it's nobody's fault. We just don't get the training. I train kids. I mean, I taught in the classroom for 30 years. And in one of my early years teaching in this Texas Catholic football school. So don't be deluded. The number one religion in Texas is football, followed by baseball and then hunting. All the other ones, they trail in after that. So, I was in this football school, and early in my career there, I was just starting to teach. A couple of kids that I had in my class were driving down one of the loops that goes around Houston, and in their little MG, and the truck in front of them had mattresses on the back, and one mattress blew off, and it flew right on top of the MG. They couldn't see anything, and they crashed. And they both died. And so my kids had to deal with that, and they had no training. And so a bunch of them, after the even before the funeral for this kid, they went to the local place and got a 6-pack of tall beers, and they all started drinking because, what the hell do I do with all this? And so, so I was teaching for 30 years in the classroom things like, what is grief? I mean, I never had 1 minute of instruction in that. That's malpractice, if you ask me. So we'll start with grief. We'll work our way back. We started with fear and despair, and then grief as we were born, and we'll work our way back in opposite directions, okay? And we're going to use Buddha's medical model. This is science now. And both Buddha and Jesus understood this, and they gave us a way. So we're going to use a real medical model to unpack this material. The Buddha's Four Noble Truths, really, he didn't want to start a religion. Jesus, they had enough religion. They didn't want to start religions, but of course we started a religion. But Buddha is I call him my Indian neurologist. He was studying what the left brain can do to add to suffering. And Jesus, I call him my Jewish cardiologist. These guys understood this stuff. But we'll work with Buddha's model first. And his Four Noble Truths are really, all right, symptoms, you're ill. So you come in with symptoms, and then he'll look at the causes like any doctor would. Then he'll prescribe something. And then, you walk out with a prescription. If you don't take it, if you don't fill the prescription, or if you got all these pills or whatever, and you don't take them in the proper order, that's treatment. So we've got symptoms, causes, prescription, and then finally the treatment. We're going to work through these 4 steps just here. Now, the symptoms of emotional phobia are some pretty rough cognitive states. If you really don't know how to deal with this, what are we running into? Look at our culture. We're anxiety. Somebody said one time there's a third of the population on medication for depression. There's addiction. There's a kind of psychic numbness that can come over you. I've been there. Irrational violence, and then suicide. This is not a pretty picture, but let's face it, this is what's going on in a culture. Anxiety, depression, addiction, numbness, violence, suicide. I mean, why did these guys, why did 18-year-olds get an AR-15 and blow away a bunch of people in the school? I mean, this is grief, despair, fear undealt with. It becomes toxic. It'll lock up your system, and at some point drive you to the edge of any of these things. Okay, so that's the symptoms. We know the symptoms. What are the causes? Okay, why don't we know how to skillfully work with these emotions that are totally here for the rest of our life, all three of them. It's not like we're going to go through even 5 months and then say, well, grief's through, you know. It's not Kentucky basketball where it's one and done. No, you know, we're going to have to deal with grief our whole life, including the end of life, when we have to, you know, graduate and let go of this body and mind, you know. So these go on, but we can really up our learning base here and get real practice in working with these. We can become much more skillful. Now the causes is we have no skill. First of all, especially in America, our culture is really strong on the Protestant work ethic. You know, Calvinist, work. If you work hard, then you'll be blessed. And well, you know, what happens when bad things happen to good people? That throws that whole thing out of whack. But you know, work your butts off, and then you know, you end up like Job. Everything goes wrong. Well, how did I deserve that? I've just kept all the laws and all. I worked my ass off, but still bad things happen to me. You know, that's a Protestant work ethic we inherited here. You can work your way out of these things. Control those emotions. Very masculine. You know, I'm not telling you women anything. Maybe the men will learn this, that we're living in a masculine dominating culture, which is you control things. You can control your emotions. Get your shit together. Can't you control yourself? You know, so that's the culture we live in. Now our parents, you know, they do the best they can. Why wouldn't they? But they didn't have the training either. So what do parents do with some kid who's experienced some
Joe, you're frozen.
okay, they'll ignore them. That's the first style. Actually, it might be the worst. It's as if it's kind of really serious gaslighting. You don't exist, you know, so they could ignore them or they could stop them, you know, go up to your room if you're going to cry. We don't do that here, you know, stop them. Or, you know, one of the real helpful things is they shame you and punish you when you cry, you know. Oh, you know, so shame and punishment. One a famous author who I'm going to tell you a little bit more about tomorrow, he said his coat of arms for his family could be put like this in 6 words: don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. That's what he learned. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel on his coat of arms. Sad, but some of you might not be far from that in your family, especially if there was serious mental illness or alcohol or substance abuse in your family. That's almost the rule. Don't talk about it. Don't trust. Don't feel. Okay, so culture, parents really don't know how to work with it themselves. And then finally, the medical and the psychiatric model in our culture. If you're in pain, medicate. You know, you're lucky if you get a therapist who is not a psychiatrist, but who is, you know, really somebody who can listen to you in whatever. A lot of people, and I feel that way too. I go to a nurse practitioner now. If you go to a doctor, they got 7 minutes, you know. And so a lot of people say, well, I like these nurse practitioners because they actually can listen to me, you know. Listening is part of the solution here. But, you know, if you know, psychologists, if you have something good work and maybe you do need something at the moment in terms of medication, well, they'll send you to the psychiatrist because they could write the script. And your deal with the psychiatrist, if you've ever done this, is about 5 minutes long. Okay, they write the script and you're gone. Pay them $150 for that or whatever. It's a medical system. But it's if you're in pain, medicate it. That's why we call psychiatrists shrinks. We'll shrink the pain. Say head shrinkers, they'll shrink the pain. Somehow they know that the source of the pain is up here. Say, but they'll shrink the pain. Now our approach is totally different. We're going to go through the pain, and what that expands is your heart. It'll expand your ability to deal with the world, not to try to dam up what's, we're all feel overwhelmed by this crisis. And so you can try to dam it up, or you can be drowning. We're doing a third approach. We're going to go through it, learn how to surf it. Silver Surfer is one of my favorite kind of mythological modern myths, to surf it, because there's a lot of energy. The energy of life is in fear and grief and despair. The energy is life and is in it. And if we try to dam it up, or if we drown in it, so that's part of the causes. We really don't have any teaching. Our parents didn't have any teaching, and the medical profession, we still don't see these mental problems like anxiety, depression, addiction, numbness, suicide. We see it as you're weak, or it's an illness, rather than something that just needs to be, you have to get a little more skill. Now, the prescription that the Buddha or Jesus would give, they're both the same. They're very simple. The prescription that a soul doctor would give you is this. He says you have to learn how to listen to the pain. We'll expand on that. To listen with the ear of the heart, as the rule of St. Benedict said. That was the first thing my Trappist mentor told me. He said, you got to learn to listen with the ear of the heart. That just means you have to learn to be totally resonant with what's going on in this moment, to actually experience it. And that's what nobody wants to do. And actually, we're taught not doing. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. Well, this takes all three of those things. That's why they're, after this teaching, which is a lot, some cognitive work, some talk, we'll go and sit a couple more times to be able to resonate with all this information. And then after we've had a couple breaks and be able to write some about it, then our final thing is we'll be able to talk about it. And we'll have 30 people listening to us. To be able to listen is the beginning of the healing, but it also takes another thing. It takes somebody to listen to you. That's the great power of a group, whether it's a 12-step group, meditation group, functional family or functional community, that you learn to listen, but to have one other person being able to listen to what you're going through. The beauty of this thing is today we got 30 people here. And that changes you. We need that. You can't work through this stuff alone. You really can't. So the prescription is learning to listen with the ear of the heart. We've been working on that for the 2.5 years, and I've been working longer with a lot of people who are here, some as long as 20 years, trying to bring the operating system of what is called the heart. We have the operating system of the body from the beginning, and its emotions and senses, and then we bring on the operating system of the left brain as we get up to school age, and then we go to school to develop the left brain. But the heart is the final operating system that's undeveloped in a lot of people. They don't even know where they have it. They don't know that they have that you can upgrade from the body to the mind to the heart. And the heart will contain all the usable and helpful things from the previous two operating systems. So when you're living from your heart, it doesn't mean you're just emotional. It's the opposite. It means you can feel the emotions. You can, of course, but it means you have a kind of wisdom. This has knowledge, and that's not bad. That's a lot better than somebody who does not have a left brain. You have knowledge. We can talk to one another. We can listen. We can use words to share experiences. That's all beautiful. We can think rationally. You look at politics today, not just in this country, all over the world, it's more tribal, tribal. I love Thomas Aquinas, who, when he became a mystic, when he actually discovered the heart, unfortunately, but typically, the Catholic Church locked him up. They took away his job as the head of the It was the number one, besides the Pope, the chair of theology at the University of Paris was the number 2 position really in the whole Catholic Church, and that he held that chair. And when he became a mystic, they took it away from him, pretty much locked him up. But he said it doesn't matter who said it. Doesn't matter if a woman said it, if a man said it, if a Muslim said it, if a Christian said it, if a Democrat said it, if a Republican said it. You can go on and on. It doesn't matter who said it. What only thing matters is it true? See, now if it doesn't come out of the dear leader's mouth, can't be true. You see, and that's happening all over the world. We've been through that before. Fought a whole war, World War II, about that. And but it doesn't matter who said it. Can we really? And how do we know what's true then? Well, facts. You can verify with facts, but there's a deeper sense. The heart knows what's true. When it comes right down to it, the heart knows what's true, and the heart has that part of the brain, the left brain, that will say, well, here are the facts. But there's a deeper sense of, yeah, that's true. So that's a prescription to learn to listen with the other heart. Now, the treatment is what, we call just practice. I've got one of my really longtime spiritual friends is going in for radiation treatment coming up. You got to do it. You got to do a series of it. And so that's like sitting every day, sitting in meditation or in centering prayer, contemplation every day. It takes a certain repetition to do it. Just, one shot here, one shot there, and we wonder why, well, nothing happens. Well, it's the same way if you're supposed to take the pill 3 times a day or take a series of 4 weeks of radiation, and you just come or go every once in a while. Well, it's not going to work. See, so the treatment is about education, which we're doing now. It's about meditation or contemplation, having a practice where you really, this is divine radiation treatment here, burning away all the nonsense, burning away the things you don't need, and, bringing out the good. And then finally, compassionate action, those 3 things: education, meditation, and compassionate action. Because that's when we get to the ecology part. We're talking about, well, what can we do? Not only for ourselves, we got to clean this mess up first, but then we're connected to this whole mess. You cannot disconnect from the planet. You cannot disconnect from the billions of people in the species, whatever. We're always connected all the time. And so the ways we try to disconnect, they don't work. What are the ways? Like we didn't get to training, but we found a way to sort of shield ourselves, we think. And this would be what I call the 5 ways of toxic coping. And for those of you Enneagram buffs, I'll throw in a little bit of that to, I've done all these 5 ways of learning how to cope with the world, but it's toxic. It doesn't work, and so you don't really deal with it. And so these toxic blocks start coming into your system when you don't metabolize the grief, the despair, the fear. If you don't metabolize, imagine if you couldn't metabolize your food. It's the same way. See. So these are the 5 ways that we learn to cope, but that don't really work. The first one would be, we'll just endure. And on the Enneagram, if you know the Enneagram, this is 9s and 1s are the masters of this. They just endure, which is different than working with it skillfully. They just somehow endure. They have a kind of endurance to them, but it doesn't metabolize it, but they go through it in a way. Now, the second way is you deny it. You deny that any of it's happening, and that's pretty much nailed into the 2, 3, and 4 section of the Enneagram. A lot of denial there. Now, you put these 2 together, and that's pretty devastating, but denial, no, it's not happening. There's a lot of denial out there. Uh, and I've done all of these, even though I'm starting at my position, but so we all practice all of these, but it's just sort of, these are the experts in denial. So endurance, denial, escape. Let's get out of town, let's get out of town. Now, the 5, 6, and 7s do it mentally. It's a mental escape. So we got endurance, grim endurance, by the way. There's not much joy in this kind of endurance that I learned how to do. Denial, escape. Now, this one's a little kind of interesting one. It's called transcending or bypassing. You've heard the term spiritual bypassing. Anybody can do it, but 1s and 7s tend to do that. Well, 1s will, I'll have a perfect practice and then I won't suffer at all. And the 7s will travel physically, but they'll travel spiritually or even chemically, mushrooms, all the mind altering drugs to take me out of this, what I'm feeling, that kind of deal. So that's called bypassing or transcendence, spiritual bypassing. And then the last one is the province of 8s. If you're a toxic 8, it's you avenge. The whole thing with the Avengers is a very 8 series. And, if somebody causes you pain, you are going to avenge that pain, like our former president. Everybody gets paid off. And it's toxic. It's toxic as hell, really. But that's what they specialize. Now, this is at their worst. You got Mother Teresa, you got Martin Luther King. Those are a couple of great 8s who had practices that got them through it, that helped them. Mother Teresa picked up the dying people. 30,000 people dying on the streets of Calcutta, she picked up in life. That tends to, talk about going through it, take him into a place to die. So she learned other ways through having a spiritual practice. Okay, so that's it. The symptoms, the causes, the prescription, learning how to listen with the heart. And then finally, the treatment, which involves education like this. If you get a chance, if it really calls to you, fork out. You can usually get a used Healing Through the Dark Emotions book, because the book's been out 20 years. Get a used copy, read along. I'm just giving you the high points as I see them. I really recommend spending the fall reading that book very slowly and responding to it. The thing I won't give you is she has a whole section on practices that she recommends. It's beautiful, and we're hitting the high points of it. But she's got so many specific practices, all from the Buddhist tradition, pretty much, because she's a Buddhist practitioner. But it's a book you ought to have on your shelf. Maybe you'll read it later. But if you read it now, it's going to enrich this whole thing. So now here's 3 skills, ending with 3 skills, the big picture on what we're going to learn in these, or try to learn in these 5 months. So these are the 5 ways that really don't work. Well, what does? Well, the first skill is what I call befriending. You have to, the darkness, you have to befriend pain. And this is different than endurance, but you have to learn to tolerate the turbulence of when you become afraid, and when you lose your cognitive mooring and you're going to despair, nothing matters, or your friend dies just like that, or I knew a woman whose mother died and then her sister died, and she didn't know what to do. And she looked in the mirror one morning and she said, Botox. She didn't like the look of her face. Your face does, you look at Mother Teresa's face, you see she's been through a lot, and the face doesn't lie. What's going on inside will make it your face, and she didn't like that face. So she thought, Botox. her daughter talked her out of it, luckily. But so you got to befriend this stuff. In other words, you have to have a positive idea. It's just, don't think of these as negative emotions. There are no such thing as negative emotions. There's negativity that comes out of not going through them. You see, it's crazy, irrational violence or suicide. A lot of negative things come out of not going through dark emotions, emotions that that's what we're trying to do. After our break, we'll spend another couple sits just paying attention, listening with the ear of the heart. Listening with is code for listening deeply. That's why it becomes silent, and we're not running around doing a lot of things. We're becoming still and silent, and you can attend to what's going on inside. As long as you're in activity, driving or fixing meals or whatever, it's a little harder to attend to what's going inside, listening to those voices, you see. So, and the third is surrendering. So we got befriending, attending, and surrendering. And surrendering is key. We don't like the sound of that word because we're running up the white flag, I've lost something, but really surrendering meant to render back to the Sir or the Lord. And even the Lord might, you think of the Lord of the Manor, or, when they say Jesus is Lord, that turns some people off. But basically, the idea of calling Jesus Lord back in those tough times when, Jesus were hiding out because they were being hunted. The only person you called Lord at that time was Caesar, you see. The only one you could call Lord. And so that was their kind of defiance, saying, no, we're following somebody else. They didn't really mean like the Lord in the big house and we're slaves. No, they just said, following this way. So to give to, in a sense, to surrender is to just, in a way, say, it's what you say in the first step if you're in a 12-step group. I can't do it by myself. I've tried, I'm pretty smart. I gave it my all, but I cannot clear up this mess in my life. And you come into 12 steps when you hit bottom, and it's a great thing about life is that you don't need a guru, really. Life is the ultimate guru, and pain is the ultimate lesson. When you actually hit bottom in that way, there's nowhere to go. Just realize I can't do it. As a matter of fact, I am not enough. But me and what they call a higher power, there is some other power. When I use the prayer, kind of the descent thing, when I say, be still and trust the love that moves the stars, I'm talking about a power that is keeping all this going. Jesus called it love, as it's translated through John. You can call whatever, there's something. I like love as a word. You could say God, Allah is, for the Muslims, that's Islam is the surrendering to the will of this higher power. And until you realize your ego and your left brain cannot take you all the way and do it, your life gets smaller. The heart is to make life bigger. We want to actually have our consciousness and our practice and our heart to the level that we can deal with this planetary crisis in our own way, however we could do it. But we're not trying to shrink it down. You see, the mind will try to shrink things down to make it safe. That's a survival thing we had as kids, but it's no good for the adult world. We're trying to expand the heart, you see. And you do that by befriending, attending, and finally surrendering, saying, I can't do it. So, we're going to take a break, and then when we come back, we're going to just drop into this place where we're just going to be present to meet whatever you want to call it, to get an infusion of energy and love and help and whatever you're looking for, grace, mercy, whatever. See, if you want a good definition of surrendering, it's the effort to reach the place of no effort. You give up trying on one level and you just say, okay, I need some help. And anybody in 12 steps knows that's you don't get there till you really realize the thinking mind cannot take you all the way. It's perfect. I mean, it's great. It can help, but you got to make a kind of surrender to it. That's why I think that's the 12-step guys are. It's the only new thing that the United States, Americans have brought to the spiritual game. Everything else is centuries old, and it's still good. But this thing about we're the most addictive people in the world, so it makes sense that we did develop this, because when you're, I'm addicted. When I ran a 12-step group, I just talked about the 11-step meditation to a 12-step group in Cincinnati. They brought me in. It was a treatment place. There's about 40 people, and they all went around. I'm Bill. I'm an alcoholic. I'm addicted to narcotics. Or there was sex addicts there. There were Al-Anon people there, et cetera. And it came around to me. I was the last one. I said, "Hi, I'm Joe. I'm an egoholic." And they all laughed, but it's true. We're hooked on this sense of me, that I can do it on my own. Boy, I certainly was hooked on that. I'm pretty sober now, but you can fall back into it where you think, oh, the weight of the world, I've got to do all of this stuff. No. First of all, realize you can't. And then all of a sudden, a community can start happening. You can rely on people. But you remember that coat of arms: don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. Man, I mean, that's just the family that guy was in. But it might sound real familiar to you. And so we're doing these other things. We're talking about it. And then when you descend into a meditation, that's big trust. That's why I say be still and trust. If you don't trust, you excuse it off. You have to trust the fact that in 20 minutes or 40 minutes, like we're going to do, you're not going to die. The darkness is scary. See, we're going back into a vast place. Remember, we were afraid of that when we were born. If you're thinking all the time, it actually is a quite small, comfy little womb. But we're trying to grow, we're expanding to where we can really work in a more vast planetary mode too, you see. So when you're dropping into meditation, you're going into a vast world, but there are no boundaries. Once you shut your eyes, and if you really surrender to it, you cannot find the edge of it. And so that's a little scary to our little child part of ourselves. And so we think a lot during this time at first because we're familiar with that. We're trying to think about, am I doing it right? All that stuff for beginning meditators, but it lasts for a long time sometimes. And just to let go of that. So just gently, the word that I use is gently lay it aside when you notice you're just thinking yourself into a little tight place. Just let it go. Just let it go gently. Let it, and then go back to maybe the breath, and you're just present again. Say, all right, okay. Well, I think that's good for now. We're going to take about a 15-minute break. We'll come back at 15 after the hour, and we'll do our sitting. So in the break, just if you want, just jot anything that's really resonating with the heart from the talk and from the day, and then take a break, and then we'll be back in 15 minutes. All right. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here.